Kate Milafalcha. Welcome back to Irish Granny Helen. And it's our Saturday book, and we are on video number 6 of The Real Marilyn Monroe by Larry Jordan. I can't say enough nice things about this book. And I'll drop a little hint. We may get to say them directly to the author. Just saying. In the meantime, if you have not seen the previous videos, please do go back and listen to them because this woman's life is just fascinating. And we are on chapter 17. So there are 2 previous weeks of videos and then number 5 today. So this is number 6. This is the second one today. Chapter 17, Let's Make Love. She got lots of international press. She was living on the East Coast. She got to know a lot of really famous people. She met and visited Carson McCullers, the writer, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. She, at the age of 35, McCullers had a stroke and was paralyzed. I never knew that. And she was addicted to alcohol and pills, a very disturbed person. Truman Capote said that Marilyn had known so much tragedy that it scared people. There's a picture of her having, I don't know if it was drinks or tea, I can't remember, with Carson McCullers and Blixen. Blixen is Isaac Dinesen. She is an author who wrote from Africa and was friends with McCullers, and she had terminal syphilis when they met. She had met and she liked Carl Sandburg. She hosted her in-laws. She doted on Miller's father, Isidore. She loved him. She was resilient of spirit and restless because she wasn't working. It was very hard for her. In February of 59, she received the Crystal Star Award, which is the French Film Institution's award for Best Foreign Actor. She did the cover of Cosmopolitan in March of 59. The doorman remarked, where she was staying, they interview everybody, the doorman remarked on her love of children. Her stepchildren doted on her. She was devoted as a stepmother to them her entire life. So Some Like It Hot premiere was March 17th of 59 in Chicago with Saul Bellow. She just knew everybody. And I think it's significant that she really had friendships with a lot of literary people. Okay, here we go. Saul wrote to a friend, I have yet to see anything in Marilyn that is not genuine. She was like somebody who picked up a high voltage wire and couldn't get rid of it. She had a kind of curious incandescence under the skin, which is rare. At a press conference, a mishap showed how Marilyn could keep her poise in public. A reporter accidentally spilled a drink down the front of her dress, but according to another reporter, she remained calm, showed no anger, did not act like the great star that she is. So let's translate that into modern words. She wasn't a diva. The official world premiere of the movie in New York City was March 29th, and she was so nervous she started to stammer again. You know, it was an old problem she had overcome, and told somebody that I look like a fat pig, is what she told him. So the book spends a lot of time discussing her weight and her shape and her hourglass figure, and I chose to not go into that because I don't fault the author. I mean, he's setting the scene here, but I feel like we all know what she looked like. We all know what people said about her body, and I think so much attention is spent to that. I don't want to contribute to it. It's a valuable part of the book, but it's not necessary to go over here. Wilder said she was absolutely, totally unique, and there was never anybody like her. During the 1984 interview at the site of the Hotel de Coronado, which had been used in a filming location for part of the movie, Lemon said, I loved working with Marilyn. A lot of people had their hands full, according to them, but I loved it. She was difficult. The biggest problem was her inability to face things. She wanted a career so badly, and she worked so hard, and so Billy was always saying, come on, kid. I feel she was a sad, unhappy person underneath the veneer. Anyhow, I loved her. Then Roger Ebert, I thought it'd be interesting. I forget what he said. Roger Ebert said about the movie, Wilder's 59 comedy is one of the enduring treasures of the movies, a film of inspiration and meticulous craft. It won a slew of Academy Awards. Though Marilyn did not get an Oscar, she did win the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy. And Ebert concluded admiringly of Marilyn, she walked away with every movie she was in. It's an act of the will to watch anyone else while she is on the screen. So true. It's weird. You just find your eyes drawn to her constantly. And she absolutely overshadows anybody else on the screen, no matter how small her role. If she could just stand there and say nothing, and you just have to look at her. It's weird, and, in a good way. In 62, Some Like It Hot grossed $14 million in the U.S. That's the equivalent of $148,133 today. In 2000, it was voted the funniest movie of all time in a poll conducted by the American Film Institute. By then, it had grossed over $83.2 million internationally. On his 18th birthday, she gave Johnny Strasberg the T-Bird. And he said, my parents were shocked that she cared about me. She knew I was being ignored by everybody. I remember feeling that everybody used Marilyn. She was damaged and desperate. So she mistook the attention that she got for love. She sought refuge at Strasberg's house when she was having an emotional crisis. Susan took to calling her own home the Heartbreak Hotel. Susan was a precocious young girl. She starred on Broadway as Anne Frank, and then she went on for movie roles. And I have to look her up because I'm not familiar with her movies. But she had kind of an ability to be objective about her family, which is interesting. Marilyn slept over at her house whenever she had problems with Miller. And Susan Strasberg said that Miller was such an emotionally dishonest man, in love with the sex symbol, but inside had nothing but contempt. Marilyn really was utterly alone and unloved. Marty Freed, Strasberg's friend, student, and taxi cab driver, was actually Susan's friend and confidant. At 21, Marilyn met him when he was 21. She heard he was raised in an orphanage, and she reached out to him. So here's, she's staying at somebody's house, her coach's house. They have a young daughter who's a remarkable actress in her own right, won all kinds of awards. And Marilyn was paying enough attention to hear and connect with the fact that this young kid had been an orphan, and reached out to him. She confided in him. She said, men don't know what to do with me. She enjoyed the power that sex gave her, but then men didn't know what to do next, Gianni Russo was a guy who washed hair in a shampoo parlor. And he had been abandoned as a teen. When he was 15 and she was 33, he was working at her hair salon that she was a client for. She went in there and he washed her hair, and he says that she came on to him. His story's details seem to fit what others say. Is it true? There's no way of knowing at this point. He later went on to make 26 mob films, like about the mob. In September of 59, Khrushchev came to the United States and went to Disneyland. Dominic Dunn was Marilyn's friend, and Dominic Dunn was a writer, journalist, and then a book writer. And his daughter was murdered in just the most egregious of ways. If I remember the story correctly, she was killed by her boyfriend on the front lawn while he and his wife sat in the house and didn't know what was happening. She was in Close Encounters. I think she was the older sister in Close Encounters. Dominique. Anyway, Dominique Dunn was married to Joan Didion, I think. Am I making this up? I think he was. Uh, interesting man. And he wrote, I don't, maybe not. Maybe I'm confusing him. But anyway, he was married to somebody famous. Was it one of the Efrons? You know, all those literary people all blend in your brain. Doesn't matter. He has always had a knack for being on the site of really controversial, publicly involved things like O.J. Simpson trial. You know, he's always Johnny on the spot. And he knew Marilyn. They were friends. And he said, I remember once at Fox in the commissary, they gave a luncheon for Khrushchev and his wife. So picture this. This is the, you know, the employee cafeteria, but it's fancy at Fox Studios. And it's full of actors and actresses in makeup between scenes on their lunch break. It's directors and producers and business people and, you know, photographers, all these people involved in the movies. And this is for Khrushchev. It was a big event. They had every star you ever heard of. And Marilyn came into the lunch on the arm of Clifton Webb. She came in late and everything stopped. Coached by actress Natalie Wood, whose parents were born in Russia and from whom she learned the language, Marilyn spoke Russian to Khrushchev, expressing her desire to see world peace and better relations between our two countries. She also extended greetings from Arthur Miller to Khrushchev, and he responded, I am honored. Your husband is a great man. We think highly of him in my country. You can bet this exchange raised red flags for the FBI and other U.S. intelligence agencies, which had been closely monitoring Miller and his wife since Miller was suspected of having communist sympathies and had been charged with contempt of Congress. And Dominique Dunn says that Marilyn Monroe was the queen of the lot, beloved by all, except the front office. I mean, Zanuck, right? He also talks about her teaching rich Hollywood women at parties how to do the walk. In September of '59, she toured New York Times building and called it such a friendly place. November 9th of 1959 at the Fox lot, they started Let's Make Love, the musical comedy with George Cukor. Miller had written the screenplay. Yves Montand had almost no English. He played the main male. Ralph Roberts was hired as a masseuse, and this was his introduction to Marilyn, and he said when he touched her, it was like an electric shock. He said he'd never experienced that with somebody before. And at first he was just, you know, oh my God, the great Marilyn Monroe. But he said after about 15 minutes, he found his mind wandering while he was giving her this massage to a book he'd been reading by author Willa Cather. Out of the blue, Marilyn opened her eyes for the first time and asked, Ralph, do you know an author named Willa Cather? She was a favorite of mine. He almost jumped out of his skin. He later recollected, I wondered for the first of hundreds of times if she could read my mind. At one point in Reno, about a year later, she admitted that she often felt that way about me, that quite often she would be thinking about some particular subject that had nothing to do with anything that had been talked about, and I would come out with a remark involving this subject. I, quite early in North Carolina, became aware of a certain amount of ESP in me, but I had never come across another person with whom it was so strong as with Marilyn. Anyway, she told him her favorite Cather book was Lost Lady. She told Ralph she would love to have made a film about it, but it seems that a silent movie has been made of it, and Miss Cather so hated the movie that she would never let anything of hers be done again, and even left it in her will that should be so. And Ralph said, well, there's a statute of limitations, maybe. And Marilyn said, oh, I wouldn't do anything like that. Not if she felt that strongly, I wouldn't do that. Okay, where am I here? They began a close friendship, and they became best friends for a very long time. This was not a romantic relationship. I believe he was gay, but they just were really closely connected. One might say karmic. He was born in North Carolina. He went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He was a liaison officer from the Pentagon to the White House while he was in the military. In New York City in 1946, he joined the Actors Studio, and he decided to be a masseuse for money because it was hard to get work and have money as an actor. He continued to pursue acting, but he became a licensed masseuse. I think they said the classes were 9 months, and he became the preferred masseuse for a huge list of famous stars. And it was one of her closest friendships ever in her life. It was completely platonic. She called him Ralph or Raffi. I'm not sure. His name is Ralph, but it's R-A-F-F-E. In December of 59, he was hired to give her a massage every night after work. Arthur was offered a small, non-speaking role in The Misfits. Paula called it a masterpiece. Said, I sometimes feel that the dream of playing the girl in it has kept that marriage somewhat together. In other words, Marilyn stayed with Miller in order to be in the movie. I am not beautiful, but I can give the illusion, Monroe said. Raffi saw her content and happy, especially when she was with Miller's children. But he said, she has low energy. She told him, my heart is sore. I have the gloom. So she would have periodic depressive times. Who doesn't? Chapter 18, The Mistake of a Lifetime. So Yves Montand got the role in Let's Make Love, and he started having panic attacks trying to learn the English lines because he spoke Francais. Paula was there. She got $50,000. Today, that'd be $500,000 just to be there and be egotistical and boss Marilyn around. Filming early in 1960, there was a huge flu that started right after the filming started, and more than 100 people involved in the production were out sick. Marilyn was really stressed, and she was referred to a Los Angeles psychiatrist, Ralph Greenson. And the author says, and I think many people would agree with this was a terrible, terrible relationship, in that she was signing her own death sentence death warrant when she got involved with this man. Terrible person. You can see him. There are videos of him on YouTube and videos of his son, who later became a psychiatrist. High creep factor. Greenson, his original name was Romeo, studied in Switzerland because of anti-Semitism in the U.S. medical schools. He went to medical school in Switzerland. He anglified his last name and went to Los Angeles for an internship. In 1942, he signed up to work at a veterinary hospital. He then enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1942 and worked in a veterinary hospital until he had a serious head injury, sustaining a skull fracture while working as part of a military ambulance crew. It rendered him unconscious, and he experienced some amnesia. He suffered frontal lobe damage, permanently lost the sense of smell, suffered from occasional crisis episodes, had some impairment on the left side of his face, had bad reflexes, and an insufficient coordination of his right arm. He became unfit for deployment abroad, and this exempted him from overseas service. Keep in mind, he had frontal lobe damage. Frontal lobe damage, often associated, just throw this in here, with psychopathy. Oh, where am I? Then he had a heart attack. After the war, in 1946, he bought a house in Santa Monica. He was friends with Margaret Mead's brother-in-law, Leo Roston, a screenwriter, novelist, and Greenson became the psychoanalyst to the stars. This was not a stable group of people, according to the author, according to a lot of people. He had his office at home because he had so many celebrities. He couldn't have an office that anyone could go to. They needed privacy. They didn't want people to know they were going to a therapist, a psychotherapist. He became dominant in Marilyn's life, and the question is, how much did he have to do with the fact that she died so young? She complained that Paula was too focused on her, on Marilyn, and as a result, Paula abandoned her own daughter. Miller was cold and unresponsive. He had a roving eye and was very dominated by his mother. This is an observation that a lot of people made. This is not just one person's opinion. He neglected his father. He neglected his own children. He had chronic insomnia. A doctor said that you're both narcissists and I think you'll get along fine together. It is suggested that he had narcissistic personality disorder. He had 15 sessions with Marilyn between March and February and March of that year with this psychiatrist who's known as the psychiatrist to the stars. His assessment of Marilyn, and I didn't write this down because it's pretty in-depth, and I thought this was an important assessment to read, and I'm sure that Larry Jordan, the author, will forgive me from taking it verbatim. She was a woman married to an academic man, sexually frigid, history of promiscuous behavior prior to her marriage to an austere academician. That's an odd word. Academic is more, well, whatever. The doctor wrote to a friend of his, Anna Freud, yes, daughter of that Freud, that Marilyn turned out to be a very sick, borderline paranoid addict as well as an actress. You can imagine how terribly difficult it is to treat someone with such severe problems, and who was also a great celebrity and completely alone in the world. Psychoanalysis is out of the question, and I improvise, often wondering where I'm going, and yet have nowhere else to turn. Tisk, tisk, the poor man, such a burden he bore, being Marilyn's great protector. Incredibly, Greenson even told Marilyn's friends, Norman and Hedda Roston, when he met them during their visit to Los Angeles, that Marilyn would require years of therapy before she could even undergo analysis, whatever the hell that meant. But his breath of patient confidentiality went even beyond, breach of patient confidentiality even went beyond that. He talked freely about Marilyn with people like fellow actress Celeste Holm, and wrote letters about Marilyn to others, in which he revealed his personal frustration with her. He soon became a man obsessed. He is a caricature of bad psychiatrist. He violated all patient ethics. He repeatedly unburied her trauma and re-traumatized her. He ran up extreme billable hours. He got her to break with old friends. He put his children in the place of her friends. So he would interfere with her relationships and then encourage his two children to be her best friends. They were in their 20s. They had nothing in common with her. He tried to micromanage her life. He made her dependent on him and exploited her sexually, financially, politically. He wrote many prescriptions for many potent drugs, and didn't consult with her other caregivers. And so they were all prescribing things for her, and nobody knew what the other guy was prescribing. For example, the internist Engelberg also gave her medication. And this is dangerous because an accidental overdose is possible when you're receiving drugs and doctors are not coordinating. As will be explored more fully in this narrative, the two doctors shared one thing in common. That was to have serious implications for Marilyn's life, and about which she likely knew very little. They were both active in the Communist Party, including attending clandestine meetings. That was interesting. She made the move on Yves Montand. She showed up at his door naked under a fur, thinking his wife was away, but his wife was there, so she was horribly embarrassed. Marilyn called Miller, who was in Ireland, and begged him to call Yves Montand and apologize for her. Montand said, "I like Marilyn very much. She has it up here, but more important, she has it here. That is very important for an actor. Many actors are very intelligent, but if they lack heart, they cannot be successful for long. Yes, I have to wait on the set for Marilyn. I do not mind to wait because when Marilyn comes, she's prepared." Montand's so nice about her that she grew farther from Miller and closer to Montand because he treated her well when he was nice to her. Miller was just not nice. There was an industry strike on March 7th of 1960, which halted filming. And the Golden Globes were held then, and she got Best Actress for Some Like It Hot. While on strike, Miller tried to rewrite the screenplay for Let's Make Love, which makes him a scab. Montand said that Miller ran to the rewrite, pocketed the money, pocketed the check, and complained of prostituting his art. Yves Montand had a pretty good eye for what was going on. Marilyn was disgusted because he broke the strike. She said, "That was the moment I knew it was over." So it was a huge strain in the marriage, and Arthur seems to have hated her. The wife, Simone, of Yves Montand, his wife was in France. Miller was in Los Angeles and then New York City. And in April, in LA, the shooting resumed. And so while Simone and Miller were away, Marilyn and Yves had an affair of 3 months long, and this was encouraged by Paula Strasberg. Paula was thinking of what's best for her client. In her book, My Lucky Stars, Shirley MacLaine put it best. She said the film locations in those days before AIDS were a byword for sexual freedom. Most of the stars had secure long-term marriages, but monogamy was not the accepted role of the day. It was kind of experimental swapping of working partners for the duration of the film. I think Marilyn and Yves both felt attraction and didn't mean to hurt anyone with it. Ms. MacLaine had her own fling with Montand years later. Columnist Dorothy Kilgallen was the first to hint at a romance between Marilyn and Yves. She wrote elliptically, quote, "An actress whose name came up at this year's Oscars is currently having marital problems." Then a room service waiter at the Beverly Hills Hotel started blabbing what he knew to reporter James Bacon, and the flirtation was exposed. Hedda Hopper called it self-destruction. But she just won a Golden Globe. It's a little hard to find fault with somebody that just won the Best Actress Golden Globe. Simone said, "If Marilyn Monroe is in love with my husband, it proves she has good taste, for I am in love with him too." Montand told her that he would not leave his wife, but if his wife left him, he reserved the right to come back and spend the rest of his life with Marilyn. June the 1st, 1960, she had her 34th birthday party. Gary Cooper was in the hospital. He couldn't make it to the party. She sent him roses. The wife of a studio electrician got sick, and she gave him a roll of money. She went up to him quietly and gave him a roll of bills, and he broke down and cried. This is behind the scenes. She donated $1,000 for a funeral of a crew member's wife, and did it anonymously. She met Montand at the airport in New York City. He was getting on a flight to Paris, and she met him between flights for a final goodbye. And they were philosophical. She said, "I have strong, tender, wonderful memories." There was lots of media gossip for a while, and 2 weeks later, on a trip to Los Angeles, Montand acted surprised about the rumors, denied it, all of it, to the press. The press agent said they've been a foursome of friends for years. Nothing to see here. 20 years later, Montand defended her on television. Marilyn's loyalty was misplaced always. She was betrayed by a lot of people. Her stepdaughter made accusations in 2004 about the dark side of their lives. Not her stepdaughter, Yves Montagn's stepdaughter made accusations about him. Signoret was shocked. Simone Signoret, his wife. No, she wasn't shocked. What she said was shocking. Okay, so the daughter, the stepdaughter, who's unnamed, I think, told her mother Simone about what her stepfather did. And Simone's response was, "Don't worry, darling, it's really rather nice. It's a way of keeping our romance alive. And as long as he's interested in me, he wouldn't leave," is what the stepdaughter felt the mother was saying. Monroe was a survivor and of that kind of mistreatment, and she would have been appalled. The movie Let's Make Love got mixed reviews. On the night of the Democratic National Convention, during a massage, the TV was on and she was speaking with Roberts, and she misled him about how well she knew Kennedy. Arthur Miller was usually politically engaged, but he wouldn't even watch Kennedy. He went to bed. It says a lot. Begging the question, did he know? That's a good question. Did he know? A friend told Roberts to bring a tape recorder to filmings where he was the masseuse and he was hanging out for posterity, and he did. There was a big shock when Kennedy picked LBJ. LBJ had leaked the story of Kennedy's Addison's disease and Kennedy's bad health, and they wanted to keep a lid on it. Bobby Kennedy begged him to shut up. In 1993, Evelyn Lincoln, who was LBJ's secretary, formally, said, so they were making this decision, the people I just mentioned. I'm trying to be circumspect because of current events and relationships. I don't want to misspeak, if you know what I'm saying. So I'm going to be a little elusive about to whom I refer. But Senior, we'll call him Senior, and his brother. She said that they were in and out of the room. She heard them. She heard what they were talking about. Johnson was blackmailing the older brother into offering him the vice presidential nomination with evidence of his womanizing provided to him by FBI Director Hoover. Secretary Lincoln heard the two brothers discuss possible ways to avoid making the offer and concluded they had no choice. The portion of this videotape of Lincoln's interview was included in the History Channel's documentary series, The Men Who Killed Kennedy. In episode 9, The Guilty Men, aired in 2003. Johnson demonically told a friend that one way or the other, either because of the elder's poor health or some misfortune that might befall him, he was confident that the elder one would not live long enough to serve out his full term. So by being on the 1960 Democratic ticket, he would wind up president. And the author says he was not clairvoyant, just diabolical. Wow, that's quite a mouthful. They were vulnerable to blackmail because of their philandering and their attempt to cover up the truth. And there are questions about her death, let's put it that way. During the DNC, while other people were doing whatever they were doing at the DNC, she was spotted with the older brother at dinner at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And there's evidence that they'd rendezvoused for years. The next night, she was at a private party put on by the Lawfords. At least once, he sent Chuck Spaulding to Los Angeles to warn her to keep quiet. And Spaulding later confirmed that, yes, he did go to do exactly that. He said he did go, but not to do exactly that. But he did go to talk to her. So if not to keep her quiet, then why? What was that about? We don't know. Chapter 19, Marilyn embarks on her last completed film. The Misfits had been delayed by a strike, and she hated her role, but she loved Clark Gable and Montgomery Clift. Clift had been in a terrible, terrible car accident, and his face was completely redone. Plastic surgery wasn't good. You can see pictures of it. He doesn't look like himself at all. She had just worshipped Clark Gable when she was a child, so the honor of working with him. The Miller script was too cerebral for film. It was really better for a stage. I've been dragging my feet watching The Misfits because there's a lot of animal, as far as I'm concerned, poor treatment, and I'm just not sure I can watch it. Marilyn expressed quite early that this was too cerebral for film. Many flattering comments are talked about here from different photographers. She's fluid, has discipline, is amusing, is intelligent, could not look bad in any picture, even if she tried. She had shimmering quality. John Huston, the director, father of Angelica, was greeted by a big crowd and a mayor at the Reno airport, Marilyn too, and that night she had her first really bad gallstone attack and ended up having surgery for that a year later. The usual entourage was there. Everybody was exhausted. The movie was trying to make it was hot. Huston was often drunk. Gable was on a maintenance dose of alcohol to keep okay. Clift was on alcohol and pain pills. Paula was on pain pills. The story was on location, and there were a lot of people, because it was on location, a lot of locals would come out to watch shooting. And at one point in the crowd, Marilyn met and encouraged a very young Anne Margaret, according to the legend. But that's not exactly how it happened. Anne Margaret was there, was in the crowd, but she didn't meet Marilyn, but she was very encouraged just by seeing her working. On August 5th, Marilyn had a very public fight with Miller. He played mind games with her, but he put private things about their life together into his writing, and he would, this is in the script especially, he would dump the next day's completed pages on her after bedtime, and she would have to get up and memorize all these things into the middle of the night. So her insomnia got really bad because she was constantly being interrupted from sleep to memorize, and then she would take a pill to sleep, and then she'd be out of it the next day, and then she'd have to take something to wake up, and it was just this terrible cycle. They filmed 6 days a week, and she was addicted to this cycle of pills, and sometimes even with alcohol. And this wasn't her doing it for entertainment purposes. This was her trying to function with lack of sleep and a high stress, and the after effects of what she took to stay awake, and just back and forth and back and forth. The script was terrible, and she complained and she was ignored, but she was correct. Huston would be up all night gambling in Reno and then fall asleep in the director's chair. Miller had an affair with the photographer Inga Morath. To make matters worse, Miller cruelly left a copy of the play he was writing after the fall on the desk in the hotel suite he shared with Marilyn, knowing she was sure to find it. His play included a thinly veiled and very critical personal critique of his wife, which seemed designed to inflict pain on her. This was a repeat of what had happened in London when she read the hurtful comments in his diary, which he left where she could see it. Ralph Roberts and journalist Rady Harris, who had heard it from the Strasbourg, saw Arthur's actions as unforgivably sinister. She was forced into dialogue written by her husband, taken from her real life. Houston insisted that she deliver the lines his way, even when hers obviously worked better given that she lived them. It became a struggle for control, and she was held in high esteem all this time by her co-stars. Excuse me. I wrote down a reference, but I didn't outline it. Oh, here we go. Marilyn and Clark Gable filmed a scene in a station wagon where Gable delivers a speech in which he says, "Honey, dying's as natural as living. Who's afraid to die is too afraid to live, as far as I've seen. So there's nothing to do but forget it, and that's all, seems to me." They would both be dead too soon. The Misfits ran out of money because Houston was gambling it all away at night, and they had to suspend production to ask United Artists for more money in the budget. Marilyn decided to go to Los Angeles to visit Joe Schenck, who was dying. Houston blamed the film delay on her by calling her doctors and saying that she was dysfunctional because of drugs and urging them to commit her. Marilyn knew nothing about any of this. In Los Angeles, she met with the doctors, who told her to take a hiatus to rest at a private hospital. She didn't know Houston had talked to them and plotted with them and blamed her for the hiatus and the film's money problems. This is just awful. On Monday morning, the cast and crew were told that she had a breakdown and was being treated, and filming was suspended. Miller, at that point, stormed out. He knew this was a lie. He knew they were blaming Marilyn to cover up Houston's gambling and wasting of money and scapegoating her. He knew that they'd only be out a week. They knew they would only be out a week. And how could they know that? Because she would be all better in a week, because there was nothing, she wasn't having a breakdown. And was this really why the film was suspended? No, it was suspended to cover for Houston's gambling. Her doctors were completely unscrupulous, and they made big money selling her, seeing her in the hospital every day. Every time they went in, they'd visit her multiple times a day, and they'd charge her every single time. And she was submissive to the doctors. They were figures of authority. They blamed her breakdown for the high budget. They blamed the high budget on her breakdown by $4 million. Susan Strasberg visited Marilyn and said she looked like a ghost because the doctors convinced her she was sick and she was so over-medicated. Greenson had huge control over her. For example, he only allowed her to make one phone call out and receive one phone call in every day. Miller was mad at her for giving Houston a distraction from his money issues. It's like, well, if you weren't such a mess, they wouldn't have been able to use you, kind of thing. Miller was too chicken to confront Houston and tell the cast and crew the truth. While in the hospital, gossip about her and Montan were in the press, and she didn't know that he told the French press that Hedda Hopper was a bee that starts with a B and ends with an itch. While in the hospital, she told Joe that she was divorcing Miller. Joe was always coming up like a bad penny, right? She felt like kindred spirit to Montgomery Clift, who had been referred to as the male Garbo. And he had all kinds of emotional issues revolving around his really bad plastic surgery. She and Clift did such a great scene that Houston offered her the female lead in his next movie about Freud. And so the question is, maybe she wasn't so sick? What? Brooks Clift, Montgomery's brother, said that Montgomery came back and was raving about Marilyn as the most receptive person he'd ever acted with. He said that she would listen and she would give you something. He just thought she was heaven. Cliff himself said later in an interview that working with her was fantastic, like an escalator. You would meet her on one level and then she would rise higher and you would rise to that point and then you both would go higher. Marilyn greatly admired Monty and saw in him similarities to her friend Marlon Brando, but she insightfully commented, "They don't plan their careers too well. They're not ambitious enough for their talents." Where am I here? There was a break in filming for a long weekend, and a group with Marilyn went together to San Francisco. She got nostalgic for Joe. She and Monty Cliff visited Ella Fitzgerald at her hotel, and this led to romantic rumors about Marilyn and Cliff, but it wasn't true. She took her first San Francisco cable car. The next day, she visited some of Joe's extended family relatives on the wharf. She complained that she had no money because paying off Milton Green for his share of Monroe Productions and took her money, and she was still waiting to be paid for Some Like It Hot. It takes a while for the money to be given out. She went to a club to see a Marilyn Monroe impersonator, and she absolutely loved it. She went to see Lenny Bruce, and she loved him. Back in Reno, Monday, October the 17th, they had a birthday party for Miller and Cliff, who had the same birthday, interestingly. Cliff said that it was the highlight of his life, this party that she threw for him. And he died alone at the age of 45 in 1966. When she was asked at the party to wish Miller happy birthday, she shook her head no. And this was the last time they were seen together in public. So location filming for The Misfits was finished in October of 1960. Marilyn was furious at the changes at the end of the script. Gable refused to reshoot. So they finished filming, and then they were told, you have to come back post-production and reshoot some film at the end. And he put his foot down, Gable did, and just said, forget it. No, I'm not going to. Marilyn was voted Golden Globe's World Film Favorite for The Misfits. In a handwritten letter on Beverly Hills Hotel stationery, November 5th, 1960, addressed to John Huston, she wrote, quote, "I have it on good authority that the Freud family does not approve of anyone making a picture of the life of Freud, so I wouldn't want to be a part of it, first because of his great contribution to humanity, and secondly, my personal regard for his work. Thank you for offering me the part of Annie O, and I wish you the best in this and all other endeavors. Yours, Marilyn." 2 days after the filming of the movie, Gable had a heart attack. He died unexpectedly 10 days later. Marilyn was completely devastated. He had been her only hero as a child. She said she kissed his picture goodnight when she was 7 years old every night. Finally, they got the opportunity to meet when he asked her to dance at a party, and she talked about it. She said, "I nearly collapsed from the shock." On The Misfits, he was everything I had expected him to be. They called him the king, and he was like that. He had a quality that commanded respect and admiration. I never saw anyone who had such an effect on everyone with whom he worked. The crew loved Clark. He had that magnificent masculinity. But my biggest surprise is when we started our work together, that's when I realized what a real actor he was. He had tremendous sensitivity. Kay Gable, his wife, and I became very close. She would come to the set and say, "Hey, how did our man do today?" Monroe laughed, "Our man, I must say you're generous, Kay." There are many things I'll never forget about Clark Gable, little things, incidents, moments, his unfailing politeness. He was one of the greatest gentlemen I have ever known. He had concern for everyone. On the last day of filming, when Gable walked over to her, Marilyn said, "Do you know something? You're my hero, and I never had a hero before." Her grief, she had severe grief, and it was compounded when Kay Gable made statements to the press that Monroe inferred were about her. Kay tried to blame the movie for killing Clark. And of course, the lie was that Marilyn delayed the filming. And Kay said, that picture helped kill my husband. It wasn't the physical exertion that did it. It was the horrible tension, the eternal waiting. He waited around forever for everybody. He'd get so angry waiting. She got another call from somebody about the death of Clark and her making him wait. And she said, I think I've reached my limit. She was assigned a new press agent, Pat Newcomb, who was a pill pusher and could not be trusted, according to friend Rupert Allen. Pat Newcomb was close to Ethel Kennedy, and the rumor was that she was arranged to be assigned to Marilyn Monroe to keep an eye on her. She had been taught by and later worked for Pierre Salinger. She was the same size as Marilyn. She dyed her hair and started wearing Marilyn's clothes. She got like sickly obsessed with Marilyn. She screened her calls. And later, she betrayed Marilyn. She anticipated Christmas as a chance to, Marilyn anticipated Christmas as a chance to be with the kids in her extended circle, her stepchildren that she really kept in touch with. And Joe DiMaggio asked a mutual friend to ask Marilyn, could he call her? She received a forest of poinsettias from Joe. She wrote her psychiatrist, it was Christmas night. I called him up and asked him why he'd sent me the flowers. He said, first of all, because I thought you would call me to thank me. And then he said, besides, who in the hell else do you have in the world? Oh, God. She invited him to visit her, then rang Ralph and reported that Joe was on his way over. Joe's made another Christmas for me. God in his infinite way has done it again. Bye and Merry Christmas. They quietly began discreetly, seeing each other again occasionally. The next afternoon after DiMaggio's initial visit, Marilyn was back on the phone to Roberts and told him, Joe's wonderful. It's like when we were first in love. He doesn't understand about me and massage. So for the next few days or a week, maybe we won't be seeing each other. Remember, loner, have more fun in 61. So that's the end of that chapter, and rather than start a whole new chapter and break up the narrative, I'm going to stop here, and we will begin video number 7 next time. So this is the end of number 6. I really hope you like this book. I can't say enough nice things about it. I may pick up the pace a little bit and start doing maybe an odd video in the week, so kind of keep your eye open. Because it's really a lengthy book, and I'm plowing my way through it. It's a pleasure to read, but it's hard to take notes. You know, it slows me down quite a bit. So we'll see how far we get in here next week. So for now, this is the end of number 6, and I will be back. Thank you for watching. Slanga foil, slancha.